A quick thank you to all of my Patreons, and a special shout out to Lemu, Firebringer Axel, and Enigma Desu for pledging the higher tiers. Your support is heavily appreciated. You know, expectations are a thing. When I go into something that's been universally regarded as terrible by everyone I know, I pretty much go in expecting something bad, and well, I usually do get that. So, because of that, I tend to avoid what's universally disliked by various fanbases. However, me being a revived Key fan who recently finished every visual novel this month, I decided, fuck it, might as well go the extra mile and watch everything too. And well, that's where we touch on this video's topic. Reright, an anime almost everyone I know either hates or was let down by it since the visual novel was so well regarded like many other Key works. The anime was seen as a complete disappointment and left a sour taste for most fans when they saw it. So I went in expecting garbage and oh boy. Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another review created by the Manpig. Today we'll be looking at, well, one of the most universally hated things I've ever looked at on this channel. To give context, Reright is a visual novel created by Key. However, unlike the rest of Key, it was written by various writers collaborating, and similar to Harmonia and Summer Pockets, Key's main writer, Jun Maeda, had next to no real involvement in it. Unlike those two visual novels though, Reright had a completely different tone and style to Key's usual works. Instead of being an emotional coming-of-age story, Reright is more of an urban fantasy similar to something like Type Moon. And to say more would be spoilers, cause a lot of it is spoilers. Due to its uniqueness, Reright appealed to fans in a different way, not only bringing something new to the table but also garnering in a new audience. However, while that is the case, there is also a solid faction of people who didn't have the best reception to it. Basically, Reright is a visual novel that is very different to what people expected, and as a result, there's a lot of people who love it, and just as many others who don't. It is without a doubt the most controversial Key work, period, and for ages has just divided the community. However, one of the few things that a lot of people I've seen agree with is that the anime is a terrible adaptation of the source. When it aired, it was a huge letdown, and even now it's considered to be one of the worst anime adaptations ever made. Anyone who's seen it will probably say it's an unholy abomination that shouldn't exist. Or, well, now, almost everyone. If you've seen me on Twitter recently, you may have seen a surprising development I've had with this anime. With that being said, let's begin this review on the anime Reright. Is it as irredeemable as people say, or is there perhaps something they're missing? Let's find out. Reright's story essentially revolves around Tennoji Kotaro, a teenage boy who finds himself wasting his youth since he has little friends and sees himself as an outcast of sorts. He wants it to all stop and just start doing something interesting instead. Due to what seems to be supernatural occurrences, he ends up joining his school's occult club, and over time, various other girls join the club alongside him and they go on investigating various oddities in the world. And during this time, Kotaro finds weird occurrences in town like strange creatures, places, and other things. That's essentially the plot of the common route, and to say more would be spoilers. At first this seems well and dandy, however things change when we come to the character roots. See, the thing is, Reright is one of those stories that's borderline impossible to adapt faithfully into an anime format. The reason for this is simple. In each character route, there are major events that vastly change the stances and perspectives of certain characters in huge ways. Some routes even include things like time skips or other whack shit, so because of that, there was just no way to have two routes happen in a single timeline. So, how did they go by working around this, you may ask? Well, the truth is, they didn't. Yup, instead of trying to Frankenstein something, the writers of the anime just said, fuck it, and made the woke-ass decision to adapt none of the routes. Instead, they made their own. I think you should already be able to tell pretty quickly why fans weren't happy with this. The new route they made did implement some minor influence from all the other routes, but not enough to say it's an adaptation of any. To say each story's plot elements were a shadow of their former selves would be an understatement, cause they're barely there at all. By all means, this alone makes the anime a completely garbage adaptation of the source. This essentially goes anime original for a solid portion of the show, and very reasonably, most people were quite upset about that. Sorry to say, but anyone who expects their favorite scenes from the character roots to be animated is likely going to be let down big time. It's such a trash adaptation that by this alone, most people I know are gonna fucking hate this anime, or at least be let down by it as many other fans were. However, this is where I begin revealing the real reason I made this video. See, the thing is, I actually really liked the anime original route, and to further pile up on the hearsay, I liked it more than the original character roots. Let me explain myself. Now, I did read the original Reright visual novel before watching the anime, but whilst I did, let's just say my reception was kinda mixed. Don't get me wrong, I did like the visual novel in the end. However, if I were to say I had the blast throughout the entire thing, that would be lying. Mainly, my biggest problems were the common route and the character routes. I'll get into more detail with this later, but in my opinion, the common route dragged far too long for no real reason. Like, I'm a Key fan. I'm used to super long common routes, but Rewrites was a whole nother tier. Okay, so like, comparing Clannad and Little Busters, for both visual novels, I managed to finish each one's common route in about 1 day for each, probably because I'm a light speed reader. Rewrite took me 2.5. I think that alone puts things into perspective. Basically, the anime reduced the common route into 6 episodes, which has the completely opposite effect. It's too short. Personally though, I didn't mind this as much as other people, since in my opinion, it still accomplished as much as the original visual novel's common route did, which itself is probably another controversial opinion which I'll again elaborate on later. But either way, with the anime's common route portion, while the characters were still underdeveloped, I felt like I didn't use nearly as much time as I did, so while not better from a writing standpoint, I did enjoy it more. The second big problem is with the character routes. Basically, the 5 character routes were done by 3 different writers, and oh boy, it shows. They are so goddamn disjointed. Certain routes literally only have 2 or 3 heroines ever show up. Others only have the singular heroine appear, and the other 4 just disappear into essential nothingness. And the biggest nail in the coffin is one of the heroines goes so far as to only appear in her own route. Why? To say screen time isn't very balanced is kind of an understatement. Not only that, but in my opinion, the stories themselves were kind of mixed. One route to me was the definition of mediocrity. 2 of them were good, maybe even great, but their endings completely ruined them for me, and I just can't appreciate them anymore. Only 2 of the character routes I'd say were a positive experience, which is not what I want to be saying from a 5-route game. Meanwhile, the anime original route, while not focusing on any of the original heroines, finally did what the visual novel didn't. It actually included everyone. The full cast had equal influence and roles in the entire story, and personally, my enjoyment was on a much higher level compared to the visual novel from that alone. Each character, no matter what role they had in the original story, took part to create a new story, and if you ask me, that's what the Rewrite anime is all about. See, the Rewrite anime was actually written by Romeo Tanaka, the original main writer of the visual novel, which means this whole scenario came under his surveillance, and honestly, you can see it. Compare it to another terrible adaptation, the Tsukihime anime. Tsukihime was honestly comparatively a better adaptation of Arcwade's route than Rewrite is of any route. However, the quality of said adaptation is still garbage because it completely missed what made the original story appealing. It failed to understand its own characters and the story it tried to tell, leading to a soulless adaptation that feels like a weak shadow of its original great self. Rewrite's anime, while failing to adapt the story completely, still captures the world, the soul of each character, the growth that they go through, and the purpose of their stories. It is still Rewrite, and in the end, the story I was given was honestly so enjoyable, and heck, some parts even got me emotionally, making me feel stuff harder than any of the original 5 character routes. Accuracy be damned. I stayed up to 3 AM in the night because I was so invested in this story. This is not something I would say for the visual novel. Just straight up. However, while I'm saying all of this, I can hardly call this a standalone story. The 5 original character roots did do a lot of things better than the anime too, such as developing a single heroine per root and building up the world and its rules. Ultimately, you can only get a taster of said development and world building in the anime in my opinion. So if you ask me, what's best is to go into this new anime route with existing character roots in mind. Rather than a replacement for the character roots, the anime sort of acts like a linking conclusion to all of them, which further builds into the future bits of Reright. Cause, in the end, all of what I just said only applies to Season 1. Season 2 adapts the true roots, aka Moon, not that one, and Terra, with enough faithfulness. I'd be lying if I said it was 100% satisfying, but the changes in my opinion didn't hurt my enjoyment too much. Heck, occasionally I'd say some of the changes were actually improvements, which I don't say lightly. If you're a fan of Moon and Terra specifically, you'll enjoy these parts enough, if nothing else. In the end, and while this is absolutely not the common opinion, I give the story a 7 out of 10. While Season 1 was an atrocious adaptation, it still has so much to appreciate on its own merit. Heck, I'd actually be willing to give a slightly higher score if it weren't for the fact that it doesn't work as well without reading the original visual novel beforehand. But that's not to discredit the rest of the anime too. The Moon and Terra roots were just so damn good that I couldn't help but love the story all the same. You basically have to go into this adaptation with very tempered expectations, because this is not an accurate adaptation. The anime tries something completely new, and if you can enjoy it for what it is instead of what you expect it to be, you may find things to like, if not love just as much as I did. Cause I'ma be real, while I rate the story a 7 out of 10, I sure as hell had a far better time than just that. Okay, so for this section, I want to focus mostly on the changes to the characters compared to the visual novel, rather than all of the characters themselves, since the characters that aren't changed, including the protagonist, can be covered in a review of the visual novel instead. And another reason I have is because I have a lot to say with the changes alone. We clear? Okay, so, another super ultra hot take incoming, the characters of Reright, in my opinion at least, are kinda hit or miss. Oh boy, time to destroy all my credibility as a Key fan. Okay, one thing at a time, let's just get my general thoughts out of the way first. I don't think Reright's cast is particularly bad. In fact, I think most of the heroines are quite good and have potential to be really good. The big issue is that nobody really has enough time to show that. Key is usually heavily based on characters rather than plot. That's why I have such a high standard for a key protagonist or a key heroine. Each one is just fantastic and have so much time and development to make each person seem human and three-dimensional. However, Reright doesn't really have that. One of my major problems with Reright is again, the common route. Earlier I said there was no reason for the common route to drag as long as it did, and this is my explanation. From my admittedly limited experience with visual novels, I found the utmost purpose of a slice-of-life common route is to fully display the characters, make you interested in them, and get you to care for them. Reright's common route didn't do the best job of that in my opinion. There were some characters like Kotori and Chizuru that were likable, and Akane had me curious about what her deal was. However, unless you got to specific route choices, there aren't many scenes of certain heroines that show off their character well. This resulted in me, personally, not really knowing or caring for most of them until their route started. My biggest example of this is Lucia, because she is my second favorite character in Reright. However, the common route straight up never touches on her true colors, at all. She essentially starts off as a token tsundere with no interesting factors, and yet none of the slice of life scenes change that introduction unless you pick all the choices that lead into specifically her route. That's not great if you ask me. If your super long ass slice of life common route doesn't sell you on or focus on all of the characters, what's the point of it? Now I'm not gonna say that anime fixed this. It didn't. However, what I will say it did do was cram it all into 6 episodes, and again, I'd rather take that. At least it doesn't feel like I wasted my time. Plus, the anime did actually put sections of Chizuru and Lucia's routes into the common route, which guess what? Builds their characters. Like, because of this decision, Lucia actually becomes the character I love and care for halfway through the common route, rather than stay a generic-ass tsundere throughout the whole thing. Sure, it wasn't done as well as the original visual novel, but for purposes of the anime original route, this was more than enough to give her a character that worked as a springboard into future development. In general, I'd be 100% lying if I said the characters were done here better than the visual novel, and that's not my argument. The anime is no replacement for the character building or world building in the visual novel, as a proper focused route is obviously going to do that better than a single core anime. However, while the visual novel definitely has more depth and exploration to its characters, compared to that, the anime has something I'm gonna call character payoff. You know how something like Fate Stay Night has its protagonist Shiro grow and mature throughout the different routes of the story? Reright's anime basically does something similar. Since it wasn't able to readapt the character routes, the anime original route instead has all the characters take aspects of their development and resulted in payoffs, which didn't always happen in the original visual novel, especially with the way certain routes decided to end. This leads into why I came to love the Rewrite anime as much as I did. It made me truly believe that the characters were a close group of friends. As I said before, I thought the common route didn't develop the characters very well, and I think the big reason for that is that it lacked ensemble character building scenes. There wasn't a complete absence of them, but outside of the garden renovation in Chihaya's route, the characters didn't really have scenes where they just bantered and interacted with each other, especially since some characters like Lucia didn't get to show their true colors in the common route. All the girls basically joined the occult club because of their relationship with Kotaro, the protagonist. However, the relationships between the girls themselves feel criminally underdeveloped. A story needs to sell me on all the characters' interactions and show it. It felt far too focused on Kotaro's personal perspective, and as a result, the believability for certain character relationships felt lacking when it came to more important scenes. You need to have all characters interact with each other on a constant basis and build that relationship for me to actually believe that this is a tightly knit friend group. And you know what? The Rewrite anime actually did that. Not really in a way that fixes the common route's problems, mind you, but because the Rewrite anime was finally an ensemble cast, it had all the characters constantly interact in ways that built believable relationships for all of them. Once the anime original route hit, all heroines had roles at one point, while building off the same development path they had in the visual novel. And it paid off with each of them having strong character moments with each other that I absolutely adored. Like, straight up, I went into this show expecting the anime would butcher these characters, but no. They were honored and rebounded off each other to make for great group interaction scenes. There were so many scenes in the anime I didn't realize that I wanted until I saw them happen in my face firsthand, and I was overjoyed when that happened. I already loved Lucia, but a certain scene in episode 10 somehow elevated her character even further for me. And in my opinion, Chihaya works fantastically as the positive comedic character of the entire group, rather than being focused on as Kotaro's girlfriend. What makes the anime's characters great isn't how faithful they are to the original story, rather it's how they springboard from the arcs they had in the original visual novel. If you've seen those character route scenarios, the Rewrite anime becomes very rewarding when you finally see the result of what character paths they took, which are payoffs that the original routes never had. And in the end, I just gotta say, I loved that. Okay, so enough of the praise for a bit. There is one exception to the character butchering, and that's the true heroine of Rewrite. Let's talk about Kagari. Kagari is technically a spoiler for the common route, but at this point, all Rewrite advertising material shows her existence, so she's kinda unavoidable anyways. If you're bothered by those kinds of spoilers though, skip to this time code to avoid the spoily Kagari segments. You gone? Okay, let's go. If you've seen my live read and live watch of Rewrite on Twitter, you'd know I absolutely fell in love with Kagari. Kagari in the original visual novel starts off as emotionless and essentially a machine, and it's only over the course of the visual novel, in some very humanizing scenes, that she slowly develops into a more human personality, and it pays off in the True Roots, as well as the Fandisc sequel of Rewrite, Harvest Fiesta, where she develops her own personality as payoff from the entire visual novel beforehand. Kagari even has fantastic characterization in the Moon route in ways which I won't spoil, but I will say it's very unique, while managing to be believable, cute, and thought-provoking all at the same time. Deadass, I'd even call it better character development than what most girls had in their own routes, but that's just me. I, in general, love characters who grow more human and learn emotions over time as their arc. Examples like Aegis, Violet Evergarden. I adore that trope. The slow, gradual buildup of personality and emotions that results in a character that's more human and realized is something I just eat up. But the thing about Reright's anime route is that it essentially just skips all of that. The big trigger to the anime original route is essentially Kagari broke. She became amnesiac and needs Kotaro to help her find her purpose and lost memories. So all of that emotionless robotic stuff, it just never happens. She acts as a quirky, comedic type character straight from the get-go, as if it were post-character development despite happening before that character development. Yeah, it's weird. Thing is though, while I can absolutely see why people hate it, I don't. I will admit, this is complete bullshit, and unlike the other characters, this is totally my bias speaking, but since in my head I've already seen Kagari's character development, and to me, the way Kagari was in the anime original route just registered as logicless fun times. For anime onlys, the anime may permanently fuck up your perception of her character hard, so I'd recommend reading the visual novel first before you see this Kagari if you want the ideal experience. For those who are looking to see her development in anime format, you will probably be disappointed with how the anime handles her until you get to the second season. For people like me though, who just like Kagari so much that they're willing to see scenes and comedy with Kagari just being funny, cute, and stuff, you're gonna fucking love this shit, man. I made a whole meme of this. It's such a garbage adaptation that just trashes on Kagari's character arc in the visual novel, but I had so much fun with the comedic anime Kagari that I'll just eat this garbage up, man. It's my trash, and I just love Kagari so damn much. She made me drink so much coffee that I got caffeine fatigue. Deadass. Even then, it's not all bad writing. Because due to the way Kagari is here, she causes new interaction to come out of different characters. A great example of this, in my opinion, is a short but pivotal interaction with Akane that I absolutely adored. It's simple scenes like that one that aren't complicated, yet remains a believable interaction which improves on both characters and pushes a positive message. It's those kinds of scenes which make me love the anime original route way more than I did the other character routes in the end. Basically, if you want to see a cute, quirky Kagari that arguably shits all over her character in the visual novel, the anime is gonna deliver a heap load of it, and while many will hate it, I for one welcome it with open arms. I'm just a simple person, I don't even care. I like the charming and funny things that the anime gave to me. Rather than focus on the lore or the world, Reright's anime focuses far more on their characters, their interactions, and development compared to the visual novel. And overall, while the characters in the anime are hardly perfect, at the same time, there are so many great moments that the visual novel never had. If you go into the anime alone, you'll probably like them, but your exposure to them will be far from a complete one. However, if you're a visual novel reader, you can really take maximum enjoyment and see how their arcs in the visual novel pay off in cast interaction. Even with this mixed issue in mind, I'm willing to give this category a score of 8 out of 10. Do note, the characters in this anime do not properly act as retellings of the visual novel, but rather an alternate story that brings out the best of what's already there. I absolutely adored the interactions and relationship building that the anime had, and it really elevated my opinion of the general Rewrite cast by a considerable amount. That, and it finally made certain scenes feel as strong as I wanted them to be, which just makes me adore how well the show handled its cast. Oh man, finally something where I actually agree with the common consensus here. Now, the technical quality for the Rewrite anime isn't necessarily bad, but to say it didn't entirely live up to expectations wouldn't be wrong either. Now first off, the art and animation. It's not bad, but definitely on the weaker side for a key anime considering the time it was made. The main problem with Rewrite isn't that it looks bad, but it looks kind of mediocre. Compared to KyoAni's anime or even Kanon 2002, they tried to capture and re-stylize Itaru's art into animation, and the animation itself looks solid for their respective times when they were made. Compared to Little Busters, where sure, the art style doesn't replicate the visual novel, the anime is still distinctive and looks great in motion. Rewrite looks passable, but when it came to animation, it doesn't feel as great as it should have been. Not saying it's all bad, because some scenes were actually surprisingly good, but they messed up in one big area: the action. Reright demanded more combat direction and natural animation for fights, and they didn't really do it justice. Heck, characters even occasionally go out of model in areas, and although you can argue that made for slightly smoother animation, that's not what you'd want to say unless it's a proper creative choice throughout the whole show. While not necessarily bad, it ain't standout either. Especially when you look at the animated opening of the original visual novel and you just see how well things could have been done. This is also not to mention the obvious 3D animation. Now I'll admit, the 3D models aren't the worst I've seen by far. In fact, they're pretty good and I do give them credit for trying. But as 3D anime tends to be, blending in 2D animation doesn't really work and can be seen as a huge flaw. Finally, the OST basically imported the entirety of the visual novel outside of 2 of the openings and is, as a result, really solid. I definitely don't think Reright has the best OST keys ever made, or at least not one that's the most memorable to me, but the vocal songs do stand out. What I will say is one of my favorite additions is how they made a vocal version to Kagare's theme called Innocence by Mizutani Runa, which ended up becoming one of my favorite songs in Reright as a whole. In a nutshell, while nothing bad, the Reright anime's technical quality is just kinda mediocre. I'll give it a solid 5 out of 10, because while serviceable, it hardly does anything more outside of that. It's the definition of average and not worth talking about, aside from the OST, but well, the anime didn't exactly make most of it. Okay, so you made it to the final segment of the video, and after seeing what I've said, you probably expect me to just praise the Reright anime and call it a completely underrated gem that most people can't appreciate for some reason. Well, no, not at all. On its own, the Reright anime does not stand up. Characters will feel underfocused, the world does lack in areas due to a lack of complete exploration, and in general, the pacing feels quite fast in areas. I'm not entirely sure if this is something any general anime fan should just watch on a whim, especially one that hasn't read the Reright visual novel beforehand. Plus, as an adaptation of the original visual novel, even I can say without a doubt this show completely failed that. It did a solid 7 out of 10 job at adapting the Moon and Terra routes, but whew, 50% anime original, fun! Still though, I can't lie. I liked the Reright anime. I enjoyed my time with it. It's no masterpiece, but it doesn't need to be in order to be something I enjoy. To give the anime its credit, and I'm going to be using this specific wording in order to piss off my friend on Twitter, but in defense of the Reright anime, you gotta admit, the visual novel is unadaptable. Even poor old Tanaka probably wouldn't be able to write a linear story out of 5 completely different timelines, cause nobody can! Shit's impossible! I don't know about you, but I'd rather have something that tries something new in a flawed way over something that completely misses the point of the original story with none of the spirit. Heck, even with all of its flaws, it still captures the characters and world well enough in my opinion. Reright's anime is not the same story as the visual novel. It's something completely different, and I think that's why people don't like it. I'm going to assume a main reason why so many people hate the Reright anime is because they expected an adaptation for the story that they were originally familiar with, which is reasonable, and I also don't blame them for being let down in that regard because yeah, it is a terrible adaptation. But that also meant a lot of people saw this anime with eyes of said expectations, and didn't enjoy it purely based on the fact it didn't reach them. Heck, I probably would be one of those if I didn't already know the fact that this anime wasn't going to be a faithful adaptation. Instead, I went into this anime knowing they did something different, expecting a butchering on the level of the one OVA, but no. Instead, what I got was not only something that was competent, but also really enjoyable for me. A story that doesn't completely slander the characters over the world, but rather just puts a new spin on it. And here's what I think of it in the end. While the Reright anime completely fails at being a replacement to the visual novel, it instead excels at being a complement. In my honest opinion, it captures the feeling of Reright well enough, and I'm not just talking about the solid adaptation to the true roots. The anime original content is not without merit, as it focuses far more on the characters and their interactions, and you'll only get the full extent of what that means if you've read the original visual novel. If we're talking about an anime only, I can't say anything from experience cause I never saw Reright's anime without the original visual novel in mind. And while I think your experience will be incomplete, I've still heard anime-onlys enjoyed themselves regardless. But as myself, I can say without question that with the original visual novel in mind, the anime original route was a joyful experience that brought out the best of the cast, and finally did a lot of things I thought the visual novel missed. In this anime, character arcs are concluded and result in wonderful group interactions. The anime original route is a climax to all of the character routes, which links all of their arcs together, leading to a much stronger payoff in the Moon route. As such, I loved this anime, and urge Reright fans to give it another chance with a new pair of eyes. Don't compare it to the original visual novel, but instead, just see how it spins itself on its new setting. With Reright being the way it is, obviously you should consider watching this if you're interested in seeing Kimi make a story with a unique fantasy world instead of a more realistic one. If you want to see the characters of Reright shown in a more connected story that builds on what each one had in the heroine routes as well as how they pay off, definitely pick this one up, especially if you're like me and were left wanting more from the heroines in the visual novel and seeing them in a bigger cast dynamic. Finally, if you're a fellow Kaguri fan and like slice of life, you'll have your fair share of funny Kaguri right here. However, I'm not entirely sure if you should watch this if you haven't read the original visual novel. I've heard from other people that they've enjoyed it, but I still think you need to have at least read the visual novel in order to get the most out of how the anime writes its characters. Also again, if you go into this expecting the same story as the visual novel, you're gonna be disappointed because it changes a lot until Moon and Terra. Finally, if you're put off by the generic art style, weaker combat direction, and of course, jacked CGI, that may affect your enjoyment. Overall, Reright's anime is just as much of a mixed bag as the original visual novel, but for entirely different reasons. Compared to the original visual novel, which used too much time, had flawed character writing, and didn't conclude certain arcs, the anime has too little time, didn't bother to adapt a story that wasn't made for the medium, and requires the visual novel's base character in order for its own character writing to get the full extent of what it could achieve. I will forever say, I love the Reright anime. I enjoyed this way more than the original visual novel, but I won't let that bias cloud the obvious flaws it has, and in terms of recommendation, this won't be for every anime fan or even Reright fan. Overall, I'll give the Reright anime great. It's not perfect, and definitely isn't what many fans wanted, but personally, I see a lot of good in it, and the things that it tried to do honestly improved my overall experience and opinion on Reright as a whole. If you go into this anime with the expectations I've outlined before, you may just also see what I see in it, and enjoy the Reright anime for what it is instead of what it could have been. I've currently spread the Reright agenda to a handful of people, so give it a shot. You may end up liking this anime despite the awful reputation it has. Besides, while liking it is definitely an uncommon opinion, any existing or future Reright anime fans can at least take solace in the fact you definitely aren't alone. I'm on your side for this one. We movin'. Anyways, that's it for this lava hot take of a video. I hope y'all enjoyed it or at least can respect my view, cause I know for certain it's not one many will agree with. Either way, that's all for now, and hopefully I'll once again see you all somewhere else on the internet. Until then, take care.